Hey everyone, welcome to Gorge Views. This is part 4 of Hockey Niagara, the fourth and final part of our Hawk series. I just came in from the outside, so I'm hugging my coffee. It's super cold, it's like 20 degrees, but the birds are still out there. And unfortunately, I didn't take my camera out with me, and I don't know what I saw, but I saw a monstrous bird flying overhead too. Could have been an eagle, might have been a hawk, but I'm just sharing that experience I had a few minutes ago with you guys just to point out they're still here in January in this freezing cold. And we need to start sharing it. That's what all of this is about. Now in this video, the red tail. We're going to be talking about the red tail extensively. I don't have an unfavorite hawk. They're all my favorites, but the red tail is extra special. I'm going to introduce you guys to the JENA Experiment and intro you guys to Dr. Christina Jones, another soil scientist. So without further ado, let's jump into the red tail. So we're starting our red tail discussion or exploration in the All About Birds website. As you can see over on the range map here, it's a very American bird, certainly a very North American bird. Yeah, you'll see it in Mexico, yeah, you'll see it in Canada, you will see it everywhere in the United States. You will see it every day in Niagara County. It's pretty common. In fact, that's the first sentence in the basic description. Probably the most common hawk in North America. In the backyard bird tips, you'll see, even though it's most common, it's not the one you're going to see in your backyard because it's a mammal eater. Loves squirrels. In fact, in my little intro a moment ago, you probably saw the photo of the red tail with the squirrel clutched beneath its claws flying over the Whirlpool. And that's just kind of experiences we get to have here. And today's intro was different than the previous 3 because it's a different video. The first 3 videos in this series, when I did the intro, I was capturing a hawk perched with Niagara Falls just off to its right. So the camera pans from the bird showing you, look, the waterfall's right there. But in today's, go back and look. Well, it's a totally different intro. Yeah, it's another red-tailed hawk that I'm taking video of, but this one was perched, much further down in the gorge, and I panned from him over to the Whirlpool Rapids. So, you can see the Whirlpool Bridge instead of seeing the Rainbow Bridge in today's intro. And if I got a video of a bird, then that bird's definitely given me plenty of opportunities to capture it, and I'm trying to elevate my game. Unfortunately, with the DSLR and no tripod, it's difficult. And today, it's always shaky cam without a tripod, so I apologize for the shaky cam, folks. Alright, so let's jump into All About Birds and look at the red-tailed hawk through their lens. As you can see, it's pretty much a North American bird. You can see it in Canada, you can see it in Mexico, you can see it anywhere in the United States, Caribbean islands a little bit, and a few of the Central American countries. Looks like we can see it in Honduras, maybe Guatemala, not Panama, looks like Costa Rica too, and that's it. Right, very few countries, which means most of our foreign visitors are not going to get to see this bird in their home country. It will be a novel bird to them. And here in Niagara Falls, it is very, very easy to see the red tail. I would say the only place in the city I don't see it that often is along the upper river. I do see it on Goat Island. The very first time I ever photographed this bird was on Goat Island. Let me share that with you. All right, this is a photo of a red tail on a tree in Goat Island. And I got to observe him a lot that first day that I photographed him. I followed him a lot and learned this guy was living in the woods on Goat Island. So I would go back on different days and photograph him. Here's a different day, same exact red tail, more at eye level, just sitting in the woods. So many different photos of that particular red tail. But again, along the gorge, have you ever seen a hawk on a dolphin? Where else are you going to see a hawk on a dolphin? Like here in Niagara Falls, that's just the kind of opportunity you get. Where else do you get to see one flying with the squirrel over a whirlpool? Where else do you get to see one, checking out from a cliff top? It was so hard to pick photos for the red tail. And so at the end of this video, I'm just going to throw in, many minutes worth of red tail photos, because I have thousands. I have it perched. I have it in flight. I have it interacting with other birds. And the red tail, he's a very tolerant of other birds type of bird, right? The sharp-shinned and the Cooper's hawk, no, they'll eat the other birds. I have seen blue jays, harassing the red tail. Definitely saw a red-winged blackbird, and I think a common grackle. So that's two different species of bird at the same time and this was over the gorge. It was an aerial show. It was amazing. They're harassing the hawk. Obviously, they're trying to protect their turf, keep it out of their nests and stuff. That picture where he's on the dolphin, that was a cool story. I was leaving to go to dinner, and he came soaring down 3rd Street, about 6 feet off the ground, and then went lower, and he probably missed the squirrel, pulled up, landed on the dolphin, left my car running, left the door open, ran inside, got the camera. Unfortunately, I had to manually focus that day because the battery was nearly dead. So not the crispest shot or the best in focus shot, but at least I got it, right? Here, this guy, he was staring at Canada, that's Canada in the background, and he hears me behind him, so he turned around and looked at me. I mean, so many different, here's a sunset. It's super close. It's the exact same bird that's in that second video near the Whirlpool. And these are the kind of experiences we get to have. This is a Goat Island hawk on the ground. This is Buddy and Holly. That's what I like to call them. All summer long. Most days I get to see Buddy and Holly flying around together. It's just so amazing how often I get to see this monster majestic bird doing its thing, observing its behaviors. It's fun. I don't know if you can tell. I think it's fun. And certainly to any birder, it would be fun. It would be enjoyable. And again, this same spot where I'm taking this photo is where I've observed a lot of other hawks. I've observed the egret. I've observed the black-capped night heron here. I've observed the northern flicker and the yellow-bellied sapsucker in this area. One of the other photos, the one I got the video in, I got my magnolia warbler while taking these photos. Right, the same one that's in the intro video falls off to its right, but down below, much closer to where I was sitting, magnolia warbler, beautiful tiny little bird, kind of just popped up out of a bush in front of me. It's not easy doing wobblers. We'll get to wobblers later in the year, but oh my God, I cannot brag this up enough. I don't know how to convey it. And a little over a year ago, I didn't know either. I didn't appreciate it as much as I do. I got to see birds. I would see the red tail from time to time. I didn't pay as much attention to this guy. Now I can't not look up. And I believe it would be addicting for many other people in town if they just start doing it. And it gets you out of watching the news and dealing with, all of the world's problems and troubles, all the negativity. It's positive. And that's another aspect of, in the last episode, I kind of talked about expanding upon our bird wealth. The other thing I say, I think in Niagara Falls, unlike other areas, it's coming back. And I'm going to be talking about the bald eagle in a future episode too. It's coming back, right? These are signs that we're doing some things right? So we should reinforce that strength. We need to really reinforce where we're making where we have strength, right? We haven't committed anything to this yet, but it is a strength, and it's a strength to build on. And if I get anything through to people in January, it's that concept, because again, I keep circling back around the soil health and stuff, because at the end of the day, we're talking about ecotourism. Birding's just one aspect of ecotourism, but it's a strength we have. Soil health is not a strength we have. It's a strength we can achieve, quite frankly. It'll be easy, and that's why I want to teach you all these concepts and all the new discoveries within that sphere of science that have occurred over the last few decades that have not been injected into the mainstream at all. They're just being ignored. But we need to learn them here, because that's another way we expand our bird wealth. You increase their habitat. You make this a healthier environment for them, which we've been doing, and I think you can see it with the amount of red tails we have, the amount of all the other birds that chase birds. My point is, we have done a lot. I've talked about, I estimate $100 million in conservation efforts in recent years in Niagara County, north of 40 million, obviously, in Niagara Falls itself, the city of Niagara Falls, within the state parks and at Hyde Park. So we've got to reinforce this, but we've got to change our culture. It takes people engaging in birding for us to really promote it. Right? We have to have a culture of it in order to share that with the other cultures visiting us. Otherwise, when they're walking around meeting locals saying, what else is there for me to do? We're going to tell them nothing. Go to Buffalo. Have you seen Fort Niagara? And you should. That's a great birding spot also. And it's a lot of history there. There is so much for us to share. So enough on that. Right, Niagara County, we've logged 2,841 observations. Look at the bar chart. It is here all the time. There's lesser views of it in the summer, only, again, probably because of foliage. I probably have my most observations of the red tail during the summer, but I'm blessed with Buddy and Holly living in the gorge right in front of me, so I see them all the time. I've taken pictures of red tail like right across the street, sitting up in the tree, being harassed by a bunch of crows. Everyone likes. That's what's funny. I see other birds trying to harass the red tail all the time. It's an interesting behavior to watch. They seem to just ignore them. They might look a little bit annoyed, like, why are all these crows in the tree with me, acting like I care? It's laughable. It's cool. It's a special moment. Thank you, red tail, for all the hours of entertainment you have given me over the last year. And the rest of you people in Niagara Falls who haven't had these experiences, go find a red tail and watch it. You'll thank me later, and you'll be thanking the red tail too. Now let's switch gears and let me introduce you to the JENA Experiment. So the JENA Experiment. This has been ongoing in Germany for like the past 20 years. And I don't want to steal too much of the thunder. I just want to emphasize that it's a bit of a rare experimental study. In this area, a lot of it is observational, right? They go to a natural area and look at what's occurring in nature, in ecology. In this case, they actually set up, this large area and on various plots of land, put different plants and different plant mixtures, and have been watching that for now like 2 decades. And let's see a little bit of what they have discovered. And if you guys want to learn more, you can go to the just Google JENA Experiment, and you'll be directed to their website or a lot of other references to this ongoing research. But let's just hear from them.
The world is currently losing animal and plant species at an unprecedented rate. Mainly due to the destruction of wildlife habitats, around 1/3 of all species are threatened. When we lose species, we also lose important ecosystem functions that we, as humans, depend on. This is currently being investigated in one of the biggest and oldest long-term projects in a grassland model ecosystem, the Yena Experiment. The foundations of the Yena Experiment refer back to the outcome of another project, Biodepth, which studied the role of biodiversity loss in grasslands.
Aus den Ergebnissen dieses Versuchs wurde klar, die Flächen von
The results of this study showed that the research plots used in Biodepth were physically too small, and we needed additional zoological and microbiological studies. Plants alone could not explain our observations, and so we began the Yena Experiment to follow on from the previous 10 to 15 years of study. Since its inception in 2002, the Yena Experiment has been funded by the German Research Foundation. Today, more than 100 people are working on the project. They want to find out which mechanisms influence ecosystem functions and make them stable. On a 10-hectare experimental site, about 600 plots of artificially assembled grasslands are growing. Some are monocultures with one single plant species, while others are grassland mixtures containing up to 60 different species of grasses, herbs or legumes. However, it is not only the number of plant species that varies between the grassland plots. There are also experimental mixtures combining plants based on their different trait characteristics. Furthermore, some plots are covered with a roof to simulate climatic extremes such as drought.
Das Besondere am Yena Experiment ist, dass wir
The Yena Experiment is very special. We are not only investigating the communities of different organisms from bacteria to mammals in great detail, but we are also investigating element cycling, nitrogen, phosphorus and water cycling, and carbon storage. We have been running the experiment for a long time. It has been 15 years now. One of our first results was that plant productivity increased with increasing plant species richness. That means that meadows with higher diversity produce more biomass. Now we want to understand the mechanisms that underlie this effect. The researchers always compare plots containing low plant diversity with ones containing high plant diversity. They not only want to know whether plants grow well together or whether they compete, but also how plants, microorganisms and animals influence each other. They showed that plant diversity had a positive effect on the diversity of other organisms. For example, in species-rich grasslands, there are more species of pollinators, pest increases are less pronounced, and more earthworms are altering the soil structure, allowing plant roots to have better access to rain and soil water. This means that a diverse ecosystem can have a positive influence on functions that are also important for human well-being. For instance, yield increases and soil erosion control. A second important aspect is the role of biodiversity in carbon and nutrient cycling. The researchers collect water samples from different soil depths and analyze the dissolved carbon contents and nutrients. In the laboratory, soil samples are prepared to extract nutrients. Their amount and combination give information on soil fertility and how well plants can access the nutrients. The focus is on phosphorus compounds and different nitrogen compounds, such as ammonium, nitrate, and amino acids. Results show that the soil from high-diversity grasslands contains diverse dead plant and root material, and that roots release a high variety of organic compounds. Microorganisms are benefiting from such a wide resource supply, with increases being recorded in both their diversity and activity. This means that they convert more dead plant biomass and root exudates into microbial products and contribute to long-term carbon storage in the soil. For humans, this has important implications relating to climate change mitigation. Furthermore, a larger pool of nitrogen compounds is available. Especially in species-rich grasslands, plants search for niches to receive nutrients from deeper soil layers. This additionally prevents nitrates from leaching into the groundwater. So, diverse ecosystems are more productive, but are they also more flexible? The researchers got answers to this question after the summer of 2013, when the adjacent Saale River suddenly flooded the whole research area for weeks.
When I saw the area after the water was gone, I could not imagine that our experiment had any chance of surviving. Then we made the best of it. We were thinking, okay, when the plots of such an experiment are flooded, all of them, then we need to measure what happens. We measured everything one can imagine.
After the results were analysed, it became apparent that diverse grasslands recovered faster. Here, there were more survivors among the many different species. Some even grew better and could compensate for the losses of others and therefore stabilise the system. We have been able to observe that over many years the diversity effects change. These findings have very important implications for the question, how important is biodiversity for ecosystem functioning? Until now, we assumed that diversity had a weak or a saturating relationship with ecosystem functioning. This would mean that a loss of species at high diversity would have hardly noticeable effects on ecosystem functioning. But when we look at the long-term data, we see such strong effects that biodiversity affects different processes almost linearly, and this means that over time we would notice the loss of every single species in an ecosystem. The Yena Experiment as a unique long-term project shows why diverse ecosystems are more productive and more stable than simplified ecosystems. In the future, in addition to plant diversity, researchers also want to manipulate the diversity of other organisms of the food web, and they aim to compare their results with other experiments across the world, to understand bit by bit ecosystems and their merit as a whole before they are fundamentally changed.
So there's a few takeaways from that video. Number one is the role biodiversity plays in nature, in any ecology. What they've determined, what they've shredded all doubt about, is monocultures. Ecosystems do not function with a monoculture, right? And what they showed is, they get up to 16 plant species in the same area. You have way higher function, like exponentially much better function of that ecology in carbon sequestration and plant yield and biomass yield from each individual plant than you have in a monoculture. And I think this is really essential for us in Niagara Falls to really understand the Yena Experiment. One, it supports all the other scientists all across the globe that are coming to the same conclusions and same understanding with their own research. The Yena Experiment really explains why the farmer Gabe Brown, who I introduced a few videos ago, has seen the results he's seen, and all the other farmers who've gone down to the regenerative agricultural path, why they're seeing the results they're seeing. The Yena Experiment really explains that. But right in Niagara Falls, right across the street from me, the whole Robert Moses removal being replaced by a natural prairie. I saw it this last year. I was amazed. A lot of locals were kind of upset with how the park looked because they were seeing the tall grass from the road. They get out of their car and walk, they'll see a lot of natural wild flowers. Not weeds, flowers. Right? And what I also saw this year, though, was I saw light bugs. I haven't seen light bugs in the city of Niagara Falls since, I don't know, somewhere in my young toddler age. We had friends who lived up in the LaSalle area by the creek, and I do remember as a child they had light bugs in their backyard. I don't know if you're from LaSalle, you tell me if you still see light bugs out in that zone. But in the past 8 years, I haven't seen them here along the gorge, and I hardly ever saw a butterfly, if at all, in the last 8 years. Certainly didn't see any on my property. But this year, 1 year, Robert Moses gone. That natural prairie's there. I'm seeing light bugs, grasshoppers. I haven't seen a grasshopper in this zone all of these years. This year, seeing them, not lots of them, but a few. Butterflies on my property, light bugs just across the street, grasshoppers on my property. I don't know if I've mentioned it yet in other videos, but I have shrubs that border my parking lot. They've never had berries on them. They had berries this year. My assumption is they finally got pollinated for the first time in the 8 years that I've owned this building. Such an amazing difference. Now, another takeaway from the Yena Experiment is how that carbon sequestration, you heard it from Gabe Brown, and you're going to hear this thing rippling effect, is how that biodiversity creates better water infiltration, right? So you capture your rain where it lands, and it doesn't run off somewhere else. So that reduces flooding. Right? You would have to have a major event like they did in 2013, as I mentioned in the video. You have to have a major event to cause flooding, and you have to be on a floodplain like they are. You saw from their drone footage that whole experience being conducted right next to a river. Now, this year, we had a 100-year storm right in Niagara Falls. I barely got a drop of rain here, but just a mile down the road, starting from a little bit before the train station, maybe 3/4 of a mile down the road, and all of DeVoe, if you guys will remember, got flooded, got slammed, and it washed out a portion of my favorite trail into the gorge because of how much rain was running off the cliff. And as you hike the gorge, you see the effects of erosion. You see the rock slides happening, and that's water running over the cliff, water running over the cliff. But now that we have this natural prairie, as it matures and as it builds those carbon things, and Dr. Christina Jones is going to explain this a little bit more here in the next video in a second, we're going to start holding more water, right? So as water kind of runs towards the cliff edge, it's going to get caught. It's going to get held and not run over the cliff, or it's going to take much higher rain events to cause a lot of water going over the cliff. So you're going to see a decrease, I predict, in erosion along the gorge. So there's so many, many benefits. And in later videos, when I start getting more into how we develop ecotourism here in Niagara Falls, I'll be coming back to the Yena Experiment. I'll be coming back to that, and I'll be talking about Love Canal, quite frankly. But what I want to do is also introduce you guys to Dr. Christina Jones.
The presence of green plants is the most important factor for soil health. And now that we're talking about all the things that live underground, we're talking about the soil microbiome. And just as green plants are actually very important for our health as well, and a whole lot of different ones. I had an interview in California just recently, and I was talking about the American Gut Project, and the guy that was interviewing me said, we eat 40 to 60 different kinds of plants every day. So I thought, right, okay, so we need a little bit of, it obviously is possible. So just talking about soil, because green plants are important for soil because it's actually photosynthesis that's going to capture light energy, transform it to biochemical energy, and keep that incredible soil microbiome alive. And it's all the interactions between everything in the soil microbiome that actually make it function. So as Jonathan was saying, it's not just about numbers, it is about interactions, but we need to have a whole lot of different kinds of things in there in order to get those interactions, in order to get it to function effectively. So when we're looking at the health of soil, we really need to be there's not much, we're not in control of what happens to soil. It's photosynthesis and the roots and the microbes that are in charge of what happens to soil, but we can do a lot about photosynthesis. And if we just look at this figure here, if we start on the left-hand side and see that healthy soil is soil that is covered with green plants. And what we've done in agriculture, not only in this country, but around the world globally, is that we've remove that ground cover either through overgrazing or through chemical use or tillage or something. We have lost the amount of green and the amount of diversity. We have hugely simplified the landscape, and now we're over there right on the right hand side where we've got soils that have lost their carbon, lost their diversity, lost their microbial communities. We've got massive increases in evaporation and aridity. Is like a lot of the climate change that we're experiencing now is we are the people, not necessarily through the burning of fossil fuels, although that's part of it, but through our landscape management. And what we need to be figuring out is how to get back the other way, and not just to have more green, but how to have more diversity in that green, because it is going to have enormous impacts for the health of this planet and for the health of ourselves and all of the other things that live on this planet with us. So as I said yesterday, it's green plants that we're talking about that are going to be the primary agents there in capturing light energy and transforming it and turning weathered rock minerals into fertile topsoil, but a whole lot more than that. This clicker doesn't, it's either me or the, I don't seem to have much luck with these things. As I mentioned also yesterday, we want to look to see whether there are actually, when we see all that soil sticking around plant roots, that tells us that there's an enormous amount of biological activity happening in that soil, because this is microbes. This is microbes producing glues and gums to stick soil particles together and form those rhizospheres. This is microbes working together collectively, thousands of different kinds of microbes. Like, how are they communicating? How are they figuring this out? How do they know that if they stick soil particles together and create a different environment around plant roots, that plant is now going to function more effectively because it can obtain all the nitrogen it needs, all the phosphorus it needs, all the potassium, all the calcium, magnesium, sulfur, boron, copper, cobalt, zinc, all of those things that it needs. It has to have this interaction with microbes in order to obtain those. And then if that plant can grow more abundantly, it can photosynthesize more and feed more sugars into the soil and support more microbes. It's like a positive feedback loop, and we're interfering with that all of the time with the...
All right, so one thing I want to emphasize here too, she just said it, but you might have missed it. Put all those sugars into the soil, right? We're used to harvesting the sugars or the complex carbohydrates from the plant. 50, depending on the plant species, most of what they produce through photosynthesis, as far as sugars and starches goes, they put into the soil via root exudate to feed those microbes. And it's the microbes that are breaking down the cobalt, the zinc, and all the other minerals right out of the rock and giving that to the plant. That's why you don't need to fertilize. Until your roots make it to China, right? There's tons of minerals, and most of what a plant needs, it needs in very small traces. So it doesn't need an iron mine underneath it to grow for thousands of years. It just needs trace, and there's always iron. There's iron all over the planet in trace amounts. Copper all over the planet in trace amounts. You name it, there's trace amounts in every piece of dirt. Difference between dirt and soil is life, particularly the microbial life. But for that to survive, it needs plants photosynthesizing, creating the energy that runs the microbe, just like we need the plants to create the energy that runs us. And a sugar is carbon. That's how the carbon gets into the soil. That's how the soil sequesters carbon. If you haven't taken organic chem, or you don't remember this from like nutrition class in high school, sugars are complex carbon chains. Simple sugars are simpler complex carbon chains. Starches are exceedingly complex carbon chains, right? And both plants and humans use adenosine triphosphate and diphosphate cycling to get the energy out of the carbon-carbon bonds. And that's all you really need to understand, is that's solar energy. That plants have been doing it since since practically life began on the planet. What we do know is you go way far back in life history, you had microbes that could photosynthesize. And I forget if there's still any left on the planet or if it's all evolved away from that because plants started doing it for them. But also another key takeaway here, in the very beginning, she was talking about the human gut biome, right? We're not much different than plants. We're very dependent on microbes, right? So this sterile universe, what we're trying to create as humans, is detrimental. When we talk about all the different health problems we have, it's because we're killing the microbes, right? Higher life forms have evolved with a symbiosis with the microbial life forms. We as humans, no other species cares. They just live their life and they're not trying to kill anything but eat the food that they do, right? Once we started learning a little bit about microbes and discovering the microbes that were responsible for the diseases, the bad microbes, we started killing them. Once we started discovering the bad microbes that were attacking our plants, we started killing them. But in the process, we're killing all these beneficials. The other thing, the biodiversity that plants need to create the synergies that really make them take off exists in our own bodies. When we start eating different plants, we consume microbes. Some of them survive and go into our gut and become part of our own personal gut biomes, and they help us digest and break down nutrients that pass through the cellular walls. And that's, a whole nother area of biological exploration that is, going on in the dark right now, is just how dependent we are as a species. If we were to count up the number of cells that make up our body, or that inhabit the space that we consider our body, you'll find out we're outnumbered 2 to 1 in total cell numbers between human cells and microbial cells that are independent of us but have a symbiotic relationship with our bodies. And then going back to the rhizosphere and the plant roots, those glues and gums, that's what's, among other things, what is causing in a healthy soil the water retention. The other thing that we should take away from all of this, it's not just making you drought resistant because you held water in the soil, but it's making you flood resistant because you don't flood, right? And going back to climate change, she said it here, I'll say it again. I came up to the independent conclusion, and as I studied more, then I started hearing other scientists say it too. I thought, am I the only one seeing this? It's not that much about emissions, but maybe it's like my previous research earlier in life on climate change saying that the math doesn't add up. The emissions do not explain these phenomena. It's the only obvious explanation for the increased carbon, but it's when you understand statistics at a much higher level, instead of stupid descriptive statistics, but really the study of variance and correlation and Pearson's R squared, and I want to take you down that rabbit hole. But this does, the sequestration side does, right? The other problem, other Nobel laureates have explained to me in the past, or as I've learned from them, it's not like I had direct conversation with them, but listening to their talks on the topic and demonstrating water vapor is far more abundant, is increasing in our atmosphere too, and it's a far more powerful greenhouse gas. They point out the CO2 doesn't explain anything, right? Now, the other climatologists, and the hockey puck and a bunch of other stuff would try to say, well, the minuscule increases in CO2 has increased the temperature, causing more evaporation, and that's explains the water vapor, and we don't know what we do about water vapor at the end of the day. So we're going to focus on CO2. And that started the whole climate accords under the Jimmy Carter area, was, you know, this focus on CO2. Methane to a lesser degree, which is even a lesser greenhouse gas. And we're going to ignore the elephant, water vapor. But when you understand what they're discovering now, with what we're doing with monocultures, and how that's affecting water retention, water cycling on the planet on a mass scale. So you're getting more evaporation because you're not storing the water in the soil. So it's evaporating much, much faster off the land. You know, in the Gabe's talk, when he showed that field with the water sitting on it, where do you think that went? And obviously it didn't run off, and it didn't infiltrate. Right? And you can look at the soil 10 days later when the sun's been beating down on it and the water's gone, how dry it is. Right? But you don't see that where you have healthy plants. That never happens inside of a forest. That never happens on natural grassland. And you got to ask yourself, why? Because of the microbial life in the soil. The water infiltrated. It's sitting there. If it doesn't rain for months, like Gabe in North Dakota doesn't get a lot of rain, but he's still out yielding people in Alabama who are getting 10 times the amount of rain. It's so important for us to understand that. I hope you're starting to see what I'm wanting you to see. And I hope you're starting to get interested and going and looking for yourself. Because this, folks, is the foundation. We're trying to lay the foundation here in January for what I'm going to talk about in February. How do we apply this to enrich ourselves? In many different ways. In many different ways, we can apply this and enrich ourselves here in Niagara Falls and achieve our destiny. The kind of stuff that's talked about in the Niagara Green video. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the videos so you get notified of future videos, and please start sharing them. Right? And when you do watch it, do me a favor. I'm not monetizing this. In fact, I get not copyright strikes, but because I add this content in, YouTube keeps sending me nasty grams like, you can't monetize this. I'm not trying to monetize this. All right, this is for Niagara, and it's about Niagara, right? And there's only 50,000 of us, and I'd be amazed if I ever get to even 1% of Niagara Falls watching my videos, so that would be 500 views. So there's no money into this. But I do want more of us. I do want to get up to 100, 500, 5,000 would be amazing. That'd be 10% of the city's population. Because the more minds we get behind this, you know, the more ideas will come out of it. I can't think of everything. You know, and I'm not saying I have thought. I haven't thought of everything. I've thought of a lot. Right? And that's what has me here doing this effort. And again, I said the video's long, so I'm going to cut myself off. Plenty of time in future videos to talk through things. Thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for getting engaged, Niagara Falls, because our future's bright. It really, really is. We just have to take charge of it and change our course. Get inspired.